All right, everyone, welcome back into another props video, touching on the top prop bets here in week 3. And so just looking right off the 9-to-5 cheat sheet here, we are already getting some kind of interesting prop bets. And I would say that both of these kind of correlate. It's going to be looking at Tajay Spears for over receiving yards and then Derrick Henry for over or for under fantasy score. Those are two of the better ones that we are currently getting on the slate. Let's take a peek at why. And so first things first, the one thing I want to point out is that the Cleveland Browns are favored to win in this game. So that is a starting point, I would say, is that if they are going to be playing from behind the Tennessee Titans, and that's not much. I mean, 3.4 points on average, that is not much. That's not enough to really change anything. But we could see the narrative where the Titans are playing from behind. Thus, those snap counts that we saw for Derrick Henry in week 1, where they're 48%, could end up being the case. And guys, Tajay Spears has looked good thus far. My biggest question is, why would we roll with Spears for receiving yards over something like just total yards? I would say the total yards would almost be the better one. But he has looked really, really good thus far. So it's clear they want to try to get him involved. Now, yes, this is going to be a more difficult matchup, but that could be the reason why they choose to try to get him involved in the passing game. And for what it's worth, we do see that the Cleveland Browns, about below average in terms of yards given up to opposing running backs. So maybe there's something there. Then on the flip side, obviously, I would say if someone like Spears is doing that, then yeah, it would somewhat make sense for someone like Derrick Henry not to be able to get hits. And now let's take a peek at some of the other props that are being pulled in currently. Kirk Cousins over rush yards. If you guys want to do that, you could. I always say this, but it's such a small number at 2.5 compared to 3.6 on average that's the reason why the edge ranking is so high, because it's such a small number. One that I actually think is very interesting is this Rice prop. Let's touch on why. So let's start with the fact that Kadarius Toney is currently questionable. Whether he plays or not, we will have to see. If he were to sit, I do think that would lead to some more playing time for Rice. We already know that Richie James Jr. is out. Okay, so once again, that could lead to some more playing time for Rice. And when we look at the snap counts, we are going to need him to get more snaps, 31% of the snaps in week 1, and then in week 2, 18% of the snaps. We did see Richie James 35 and 4, so that'd be one of those things where we need to see probably Toney to be out as well, because that's around 25 to 30% of the snaps as well. If that occurs, then yes, Rice would be a better option. But what is the other factor in this game that could lead to Rice getting more playing time? It's this matchup with the Chicago Bears. The Bears are 12.5-point underdogs, so obviously if this game's a blowout, that could lead to someone like Rice getting some more work. And the thing with the rookie players, maybe they try a play designed to him to get, just some film on him. That's kind of an afterthought to me. Like, I don't really care about that, but this is one of those situations where kind of like with Brandon Ayuk on Thursday Night Football, where, Deebo Samuel was already a pretty good bet to get over 4.5 receptions. Once Brandon Ayuk was ruled out, that made that bet even better. This could be another situation to jump on that before we get the news that Toney's out. Now, I don't think he is going to. I think Toney's going to play. So Rice slot him in for about 20% of the snaps. And we're just hoping that that's going to be enough. Thankfully, the first 2 games it has been. Gets a really, really good matchup this week against the Chicago Bears as well. When we look at DVP, it could be a little bit higher, but at the same time, yes, a good matchup, not a matchup that you are straying away from. And guys, I'm sorry if I lose my voice at all during this. I'm a little bit sick. And now moving on to the next couple of ones that we get. We got Hunter Henry for under fantasy score. I find this one interesting for sure. Hunter Henry has been a guy that has just been playing a ton of snaps, 79 and 92 thus far for the Patriots. And I don't see that changing. What we could potentially see changing is the kind of touchdown upside there. And he could still get his over fantasy score while not getting those touchdowns. Like, that could easily happen. What we do need to note is that this game is an extremely low projected game, 35.9. Okay, so not going to be as high scoring and not going to be as easy of a matchup for the Patriots throwing the football as it has been thus far. And actually, if we look at DVP, the Jets are, pretty good. Now, they have given up 2 touchdowns, so that, don't love that. 2 opposing tight ends there, but all in all, I can see why the data likes Hunter Henry for less points, and just due to that touchdown regression, if that occurs and the Jets do kind of present some sort of resistance to his fantasy score, then I can see why the data likes that one. Now, for me personally, that's probably going to be one I'm going to stay away from. Same thing with Desmond Ridder, although guys, if he's going to be rushing as many times as he did last week, it's tough to ignore that. I would argue, yes, they won because Bijan Robinson really put the team on his back, but also Ridder had a couple of clutch runs last week. And although I don't think he's a good quarterback, did enough. He ran the ball 10 times, right? That could have very well been a schematics thing for sure. But if you look against Detroit, they have given up a decent amount of rushing yards to opposing quarterbacks, so there could be something there. But all in all, that's another one where I'm probably going to be staying away from. Same thing with Zeke under fantasy score. Like, he could fall into the end zone more times than not. He won't. I already mentioned the Derrick Henry one. These next two are two ones that I really like. Jerome Ford for over 12.5 rushing attempts. We can see Underdog has already bumped it up. We can see the sportsbooks already have it at 12.5. This is one that I've already hammered. Hopefully it comes true. Now, I need to pull up two situations for this one. One, let's look at Nick Chubb's carries. So Nick Chubb, thus far this season, had 18 and 12. So he's well on his way to getting the over in that game. We look at Jerome Ford in his last game, obviously a little bit better of a matchup, but I wouldn't say too much better. He got 16 in that, and then he had 15 in the first game. Like, he most likely will get the work. But the other thing I want to look at is going to be Joshua Kelly. Guys, I am losing my voice. Josh Kelly last week still had 13 rushing attempts in that game. And I think we're going to see much more of a commitment to Ford this week, especially with Kareem Hunt, probably still getting back into game shape. There's a difference between like camp shape, off-season shape, and game shape. So they probably won't give Kareem Hunt that much of a workload. So this is one of the ones that probably makes the most sense on the slate, honestly, given the nature that we have of the bets that are out there. And then the next one we saw is Cade Otton for over his fantasy score. And we can see just based off of how many snaps he's been playing, this is certainly going to be an interesting one. And we look at what he's done thus far this season. 3 targets in the first game against Minnesota. Ended up with 3.9 PrizePicks points. Guys, when it's DraftKings and PrizePicks have the same scoring structure, unless it's like the bonuses that DraftKings has, PrizePicks doesn't have that. So that's why I like using DraftKings as an FYI for the fantasy score. Against Chicago, he did have a much better game, but this number right here is pretty low, 6.5. And why is it also low? Let's look at this matchup that he gets. A great matchup this week going against Detroit. Sorry, I said Detroit, I meant Philly. Philly is actually a better matchup in terms of like fantasy points given up because they've given up 3 touchdowns. A decent amount of targets, decent amount of receptions and yards as well. So yeah, that's one of my favorite ones on the slate, especially if he's going to continue to play those snaps. I will say my biggest concern would be his route percentage, but when you're playing that many snaps, like, it doesn't really matter to me. Like, we'd want higher targets as well when you're playing that many snaps. Like, in comparison, we can see Tyler Higbee and also Dallas Goedert, a little bit higher of a route percent, even Hunter Henry, a little bit higher of a route percent. So that's kind of the worry there, but such a low number should be a good one for us. And what's the common theme that we are seeing here? A lot of the best props that we are getting are these fantasy score props. Rashad White for under 13 fantasy points on PrizePicks. We can see he's projected at 12.5. The sportsbooks have it set on average at 11.5, so we can see why that is one you could be targeting. I'm probably not touching that. He did look much better last week, like easily his best game in his career. Maybe there's some slight correlation there, but I don't think that's enough to really go in at all between Otton and White. From there, Mac Jones, rush yards, I'm not touching that. He's actually looked pretty good rushing the football. Dalvin Cook as well for over receiving yards. We can see Underdog has it set at 8.5, which is closer to what the average sportsbook line has it set at, whereas PrizePicks has it set at 7.5. I'm probably not touching that. Mostert, I personally don't want to touch either. PrizePicks is certainly higher, though, than what the sportsbooks are thinking, what the projection data is thinking as well. Does seem to be a very touchdown-dependent play. Last week, I had called out that in week 1, he probably should have had 2 touchdowns. And then last week, he did have 2 touchdowns. That's due to regress, probably, although with Jalen Waddle, maybe we see him a little bit more involved. Here's an interesting one. Tony Pollard for over receiving yards, okay? Underdog has it set at 19.5. The average sportsbook line has it set at that pretty much as well. The projection data has it set at 19 as well. So we are gaining a slight edge here. Now, I do just want to look at kind of receiving yards to running backs, DVP wise, because against the Cardinals, okay, they are going to be heavy favorites in this game. I mean, Arizona is projected to lose by almost 13 points. So that wouldn't like really correlate too well with Tony Pollard getting his over receiving yards. But at the same time, you have to get there. Right, you have to get those points, and we are seeing that, probably not the best matchup in terms of receiving yards, so maybe that's more of one that I'm choosing to stay away from. And now for the 3rd straight week, one of the best props that we have is going to be Jordan Love for over 14.5 fantasy points. And once again, for the 3rd straight week, we can see the sportsbooks are actually liking him a little bit more this week than I think they did last week. The projection data also has the over set as well. What's the one takeaway with Jordan Love this week? It's that we expect what he's been doing to continue again this week, okay? A lot of people are calling to his completion percentage. If they're calling to that as like a negative, they're really not watching the games. Quarterback rating, I think, tells us a better picture of what's been going on. Now, a lot of these plays have been easier plays to get touchdowns on, I will say. Schematically, that's part of the reason why I love Jordan Love. It's part of the reason why I've loved the Packers offense thus far. That's why I was hyping them up this whole offseason is Matt LaFleur. This is like the ideal system for this offense. It's like exactly what he wanted. And that's, you can see the pieces that he's drafted are now mimicking what he's been wanting. Like it makes sense now. We saw this in the preseason. I think that's going to continue again. Now, yes, this is a very low number. And I would say if he's going to get there, he's probably going to need to rush the football, maybe a little bit more. But he might get Aaron Jones back, which could help in the passing game. We saw a couple of big plays to Aaron Jones, but he also is seeming like he's going to get Christian Watson back. Now, there might not be a full allotment of snaps, but I would say if you switch Watson with Wicks, who's their rookie receiver for them, the last 2 games, Jordan Love probably has 2 more touchdowns. Okay, so yeah, this is going to be one of my favorite ones on the slate. And then from there, guys, we have a ton of Khalil Herbert props that are popping up. Now, what doesn't make sense to me is that we are seeing under receiving yards is one that, or under fantasy points is kind of popping up. But we'll see with him is that we are getting some of these here where receiving yards, rush yards, slightly favoring the over there. Okay, so I want to call this out with Khalil Herbert as well because I feel like these make for probably better bets on the sports books. I like his overs actually, and even the fantasy score, I like his over as well. The thing with the Chicago Bears is we know they haven't had that many bright spots. Their quarterback got too much love for having accuracy issues, and we've seen now the quarterbacks from last year that probably had better seasons than anyone expected that had accuracy issues. Daniel Jones, Justin Fields, they are struggling this year. It's because defenses seemingly have adjusted. They're like, all right, just throw on us, please. And we've been seeing that happen. But the 2 players that have really looked good thus far for them, DJ Moore and Khalil Herbert. Now, the biggest issue that we have with Khalil Herbert is this game becoming a blowout and then Roschon Johnson getting a little bit more work as well. But I do think when games are close, and I know this game isn't projected to stay close, we are going to see more of this 60-40 split. And the thing with Herbert is it just feels like he's been disrespected by really all the ones that are out there. We saw 3 straight screenplays designed to go to him. Obviously, that didn't work out. That ended up in pick 6. But they need to get him more work. Like, if they want to be competitive, they need to get him at least 15 opportunities per game. Now, I know a lot of people are going to be saying, well, Johnson looks so good. He does, but he's more like A.J. Dillon or, I guess, Zeke last year. It should be more like Pollard Zeke here, but with Herbert leading the way. That's how they should treat this situation, and they just need to get both of these guys the ball more. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but I did think that those props for Herbert, they just seem so low in a game where it's going to be a game script that would favor the Bears having to throw more, and so that's why I kind of like the receiving base props there for Khalil Herbert. Continuing on, CJ Stroud for over fantasy score. I mentioned last week that I thought CJ Stroud looked really sharp, and then we saw him really go off last week. Now, a lot of that production was in garbage time, but it wouldn't be shocking for him to be able to get over 14 points again. He did have an injury concern, but they seemingly want to throw the football a lot. And with Nico Collins looking as good, better than I expected, and I was probably one of the few people that was hyping him up a ton, and he's looking better than that. Tank Dell looking really good. Robert Woods not looking as bad as he did last year. There's a lot to love about CJ Stroud, and part of the reason why he could be a good option for us is because they just don't want to run the football. Like, if we're getting a quarterback throwing the ball 44 and 47 times, let's just take that. Okay, I know the matchup with Jacksonville isn't that great, but it does make sense. And he ran the football pretty well in the first game, not as well in the second game. Obviously, touchdowns are a little bit fluky. We can't really rely on those. But all in all, I think he's going to be a pretty good option for us. And then from there, another one, Miles Sanders under fantasy score. I don't know if I want to do that one. Zach Wilson. This one I find fascinating, guys. Zach Wilson probably played his best game as a pro last week. And some people are probably like maybe just stat watching and hearing that statement like, what? He was terrible. And don't get me wrong, he threw like one terrible pass that shouldn't have been made. I would say each week, every single quarterback, maybe even Rodgers, they throw a bad pass, a pass that should be picked off. It's just whether or not that pass does get picked off. For Zach Wilson, that terrible pass got picked off. Now, there were 2 other interceptions as well that I put more on the receivers. There was one Garrett Wilson probably should have scored a touchdown on. How do I explain it with my fingers here? Pretend my microphone is Garrett Wilson. There's 2 defenders in the middle. What Garrett Wilson had to do is like jump ahead of the defender to Like, he had to play the ball, and instead he tried to like be a defender on the play. It was strange. It was you watch the film, and I was thinking, I'm like, man, if Aaron Rodgers throws that pass, I think Garrett Wilson actually high points that ball, and it's a walk-in touchdown. But I think it's because it was Zach Wilson. He doesn't have the confidence in Zach Wilson. He was just thinking protect instead of like make the play. It was just weird. That's my long way of saying good game by Zach Wilson. That he probably was their best player on offense last week. And I don't know if that means he's going to have another sharp game. And I should mention that sharp. That's the best way to phrase it. CJ Stroud 2 weeks ago in week 1, I thought he looked sharp, even though the production wasn't there. That's how I should explain Zach Wilson. When he needed to make throws, they were good throws. Now, the issue is that Dallas defense was just freaking good. I don't think we're going to see New England be as good of a defense. And so, sure, we need him to throw a touchdown. And I think we'll see a better game out of him. This is going to be maybe his easiest match of the year thus far. You kind of feel bad for him, right? With 3 straight really difficult matchups and really everyone just hating on him. I'm like, this is a tangent, I'm sorry, but I'm like, why is Justin Fields getting all of these excuses and then Zach Wilson's just getting tossed under the bus? It's weird. But yes, far from a lock and load there, but it is such a low number. He rushed the ball really well. I don't see them playing that poorly of a game altogether as an offense. It almost seems impossible. Like it's something when he is your best offensive player, right? Like that's not good. And then from there, are we getting any other good props that we could roll with? This one I find interesting. We have already seen this bumped up to 2 for Kirk Cousins for passing touchdowns. And I would say if that is true, probably fantasy points for him over fantasy points. Then from there, any other ones? Calvin Austin, over 2.5 receptions. If you guys were watching that game, as I was, I would say, yeah, he should have got more involved in the passing game. That was strange that they didn't. Now, George Pickens looked good, don't get me wrong. Much easier matchup for that team. Yeah, I could see betting over 2.5 receptions for Calvin Austin. I'm actually curious. Let's see his snap counts. So Calvin Austin last week played in 77% of the snaps. Allen Robinson still played a lot. George Pickens still played a lot. But yeah, if he's going to be playing that many snaps, yeah, let's get him the ball. He had 4 targets, right? Like catch 3 of those, and they're mostly kind of easy throws. Yeah, I think I like that one a lot. And then from there, any other ones that we are getting, we're getting a lot of good EV bets. I will say that. Like, let's just take out fantasy score. Nah, it's fine. We will keep it in there. But we can see we're getting a lot of bets where they're just strong EV bets, over 54% chance to hit. If you guys want to roll with those, by all means, I get it. And I think an easier way of showing those is just by going into the PrizePicks prop cheat sheet and showing you guys. Jerome Ford, highly likely. Calvin Austin, really good one. Kenneth Walker, over 15.5 rush attempts, a decent one. So we can see we are getting some pretty good EV bets. And then on the flip side, Russell Wilson, will he get 4 rushing attempts? I don't know if I like that. I feel like he should get 4 rushing attempts, so I'm probably just not touching that. Justin Jefferson, that's been bumped to 7.5. That's a lot. You can kind of guess why that's under. It's just probably likely. But yeah, we can see we are getting a ton of really good EV bets for week 3, which is awesome. Let's go ahead and get to my favorite bets. If you guys want to use any of these ones, by all means, do that. Now, here's what my bet of the day would look like. And honestly, it's going to be these first 4 that I really like. My only worry is that these get corrected. So I'm going to give you guys another slip that probably will still be there by, at the time the majority of you guys are watching this video. That's the toughest part, right? Like, I can give you guys all the EV bets in the world, but PrizePicks is going to correct them. That's where the tool comes in clutch. If you guys want access to that, click the link in the description below, $10 a month. And so here's a better bet slip in terms of a bet that probably won't get bumped before you guys get here. Now, Calvin Austin probably will. Okay, don't get me wrong there. But then from there, these other ones, they should still be there. For what it's worth, Zach Wilson was the last one in this. Tried talking myself into it. It does still feel ugly, especially given the matchup. But all in all, these are just the best fantasy score props that we have available. Thus, I'm giving to you guys because they are the ones that are going to be the most likely to still be there by the time you guys are viewing this video. That's all I have for you guys for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the coverage. If you did, make sure to give a like and subscribe. If you guys want access to that 9-to-5 cheat sheet, click the link in the description below. It is just $10 a month. If you guys want access to the ODDSJAM sportsbook screen and their fantasy optimizer as well, click the link in the description below. Use the promo code 925 to get 25% off. All right, let's have a good slate. And as always, let's keep cashing.